Hi there, and welcome to the first extra that I'm producing for this course. The extras will be added over the next few months, and they will be small projects that allow you to do extra little things like making a custom keyboard. This one has been requested by a number of people, and it's actually pretty easy. So let's get started straight away. Custom keyboards were introduced by Apple in iOS 8, and they're completely compatible with Swift, so still no Objective-C. And I'm going to show you how to do it in about 10 minutes here, so it's pretty easy. First, we've got to decide what sort of a custom keyboard we're going to make. I'm going to make a Hodor keyboard. Now, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, Hodor is a character who can only say Hodor. So I thought he'd like his own special keyboard with his face on it, which does nothing but say Hodor. It's obviously a very simple keyboard, but it will show you everything that you need to make any keyboard you like. So we'll be coming back to Hodor in a minute, but for now, let's go back over to Xcode and start our single view application. Same as usual. We'll call it Custom Keyboard. And usual settings, Swift iPhone, we don't need core data here. And then we'll save it in our keyboard folder, and we get, of course, all the usual settings. Nothing special about this. It's just our standard view controller and main storyboard. So to get our custom keyboard, what we do is we go to File, New, Target, and this allows us to set up various options, particularly the ones that have been introduced in iOS 8, like action extensions, photo extensions, etc. Obviously, the one we're particularly interested in is Custom Keyboard. If you can't see it there, then just click Application Extension under iOS, and it'll come up there. So there's Custom Keyboard. Click Next. I'm going to call it Hodor Board. You can, of course, call your custom keyboard whatever you like. And then, notice we've got a new folder here called Hodor Board, which has got nothing but a viewcontroller.swift file and some supporting files. So fortunately, Apple have given us a bunch of code which actually makes a keyboard all by itself. So we've actually got a keyboard set up already. So let's just have a quick look through what this code does, and then we'll run it and see how it looks. So we've got our usual import UI kit, and we've got our keyboard view controller, so nothing too strange there. Every keyboard at a very minimum needs to have a next keyboard button, which allows the user to move on to another keyboard so they don't get stuck in your keyboard and unable to switch to another one. So you need to have a next keyboard button, and Apple puts one in by default for you. There's a function there, Update View Constraints, which you can use to change your keyboard, for example, when the user changes from landscape mode to portrait mode. Then we've got our classic viewDidLoad method. We'll look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. And then we've got some other methods down here. We've got our usual didReceiveMemory warning method, and then we've got a method that we can run just before the text is about to change, or the user is about to put some text into the text field that they're in. And this one is just after the user inputted some text. So the most useful lines for us are here. Really, it's fairly straightforward. All that's happening in these first few lines is the setup of the next keyboard button. So we're adding a UI button, and we're setting its title to next keyboard, and we're changing the size, etc. And then we're adding a method to that button, which is advanced to next input mode, which is a standard method that just moves the user on to the next keyboard. And then finally, we're adding the button to the view. So nothing too strange there. Now here, we haven't actually seen this before because we haven't done custom constraints. We've been doing all our layout through the main storyboard, but you can actually do it through code as well. So if you're interested in that, you might want to have a deeper look at this bit of code. You can Google constraints as well, and you'll get loads of answers and guides to how to set up your constraints manually. Essentially what that's doing is setting the layout of the next keyboard button. So all of this code here, all it's doing is setting up the next keyboard button. Great. So before we actually customize our keyboard at all, let's run it and see what our current keyboard looks like. Now, Xcode knows that we've got a custom keyboard here, so we can choose to run certain apps to test our keyboard in if we want to. It doesn't really matter which app we run for the moment, so let's just go for Safari and take a look and see what our custom keyboard looks like. So here we go, we're in Safari on our iPhone. I'm going to press the Home button, which you can either do with Command-Shift-H or click Hardware and Home. And then we're going to need to click Settings, because the user has to actually select our keyboard before they can start using it. So I'm already in the general area there, but this is the default settings. So then you click General and then Keyboard, Keyboards, and Add New Keyboard. Now, firstly, you'll see that the keyboard's not there. I wanted to bring that up because often I found that when you add a new keyboard in the way that we've done, it doesn't appear there by default. So we actually need to quit the iOS simulator. So Command Q, and then in Xcode, we click on Xcode and open Developer Tool and add the iOS simulator. So that brings it back. And I think that's just a matter of you need to restart the simulator to allow it to access your new keyboard. So again, we'll click Settings and General, Keyboard, Keyboards, Add New Keyboard, and there we are. There's our custom keyboard. So it might have appeared straight away for you, but normally I find that I have to restart the simulator in order to get it to appear. So now we've got our Hodo board there under custom keyboard. Fantastic. So now we go back to the home screen and bring up Safari again. And then we click there and we'll see the keyboard comes up. If the keyboard doesn't come up, you might need to uncheck the Connect Hardware keyboard. Often I use the Connect Hardware keyboard, which allows you to use your Mac keyboard to interact with the iOS simulator, but you'll need to undo that here because of course you want to test out the software keyboard. So to bring up your keyboard, you just hold down on the world icon there and then drag up to Hodo board. And there it is. So very simple. All it's got is a grey background and a next keyboard button. And you can see we can click next keyboard there and that just brings us back to the default keyboard. Great, so that's basically it. We've actually got our custom keyboard, but let's make our keyboard actually do something. So we're going to bring in our Hodor. So let's go back over to Chrome and I'm just going to use the screenshot tool. If you're on a Mac, that's Command-Shift-4. There we go. And that then saves him to the desktop. So let's now bring him back into Xcode. So if I go back into the Finder, there's my screenshot. I'm just going to rename that to make it easier later on to Hodor. And then I'm going to drag him in. He must be in the Hodor board area of your file structure because they're separate apps, these two. The Hodor board and the app itself can't interact with each other. So if you want to access an image or any kind of file, it has to be inside the keyboard area. So now it's just a matter of adding our Hodor image as a button to our app. And I'm going to give that to you as a quick challenge. Can you add the Hodor image to the background of a button in the middle of our keyboard? I hope you managed that. Here's how I would have done it. So let's create a button. So let button equals UI button dot button with type. And the button type that we want is the standard system button. And slightly oddly, we need to downcast that to UI button, just to make it really clear that we want button to be a UI button. And now we want to position and set the size of our button. So we use button.frame and we're going to make a CG rectangle. So let's try out some numbers here. I'm going to go for 150 pixels from the left of the screen, 40 pixels from the top of the screen, or not the screen, sorry, from the top of the keyboard, and then 100 pixels wide, and 120 pixels high. I think that should work okay, but we can always adjust those a bit if we want to. Now let's create an image that we can use to refer to Hodor. So we use UI image named Hodor.png. That's the name of our image over here. And then we want to set the background of the button to be our, so we use button.set background image. The image we want is Hodor, and the state is normal. So just the normal state, not pressed or anything else. And the last thing we want to add to the button is the method that we want to run when the button is actually pressed. So we do that using add target, and the view controller is going to control this, so that's just self, and the action, we haven't made it yet, but let's just call it something like did press button. And then for control events, we want this to happen with when the user taps the button, essentially. So touch up inside, the same as the usual method that we use on buttons. Okay, now we've customized our button and we've added everything that we need to know about it. So let's just add it to the view. So self.view.add subview button. Great. So we're almost there. The only thing we need to do now is to write the method didPressButton. So let's do that. So func did press button. We're not actually passing any information to this. We're just running it when the button is pressed. So we don't need anything in those brackets. And we need to create what's called a text document proxy. There it is. Which essentially allows us to interact with the box wherever the user is typing in and put some more text there. So we use the text document proxy, and we want to downcast that UI text document proxy. And then this will allow us to do something with the area where the user is entering the text. And all we want to do is proxy insert text. What text are we going to put in? It's got to be Hodor, because that's the only thing that Hodor ever says. Okay, so let's run this, and we just press play, and again we can choose whatever app we like. So we'll just choose the Today drop down for now. Here we go. So let's bring up Safari, tap in the search bar to bring up the keyboard, and then hold down on there to bring up our Hodor board. And there he is. Fantastic. Looks pretty nicely centered. And then when we tap on him, there we go. We get our Hodor. Fantastic. So that's how to make a custom keyboard for iOS 8. Obviously, your custom keyboards will be much more exciting and inventive and indeed useful than mine, but hopefully this will give you a good guide to get started and start creating exciting custom keyboards.